Charlene Hartman, and this is a special report, Bendigo Studio, COVID While Black. And we're in partnership with the Robert McCormick Foundation. Today, our episode is on the last responders, the death care professionals. COVID has changed everything, including funerals. And we're going to be talking to Mr. Augustus Cage of Cage Memorial and Spencer Leak Jr. of Leak Funeral Home. Welcome, and thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Describe the role, if you will, of a funeral director and the importance during the pandemic that we're living in. The role of the funeral director.
Mr. Cage, you want to start?
Yeah, I can. Our primary role is to, when families call upon us as a result of a loss of a friend or a family member, our principal function is to guide them through the process of planning and coordinating a celebration of life or final arrangements for that individual. And it's all about the funeral director guiding them through the process in a structured way and planning. In many ways, we are sort of event planners because the services that are to be conducted and held are primarily for the benefit of commemorating the person's memory and allowing the family to have some closure. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has severely impacted us as funeral service providers to the extent that we're limited in terms of attendees that are allowed by state and local mandates. We're limited in the number of people who can be in attendance. So we have to very carefully and diplomatically work with families in explaining why this is. And some of us have had to take some extended steps to make sure that we're in compliance with the state and the local legal requirements. Otherwise, it could impact our licenses.
So let's talk, we're going to get into that a little later, but before COVID, let's talk about how the dynamics have changed for your businesses. Before COVID, what was your average weekly number of funerals before COVID? Spencer?
You know, my father has taught me never to really count, but we maybe for us, maybe 150 a week or so that we would handle.
Oh.
I'm sorry, 150 a month, not a week. I'm sorry.
So what is it now? I mean, I know your business has just changed so drastically.
Our business has increased. Our funeral directors, our drivers are out pretty much all day and night at calls at different nursing homes, hospice calls, homes. We've had to hire more staff to handle the number of calls that we are getting. So yes, it has increased tremendously.
So what's the new funeral looking like? I mean, Mr. Cage, you were talking about the dynamics of the change, but what's the new funeral? I mean, we've got a whole brand new service. What's that service look like? It's the limited numbers of, is it 10 people?
10 people now. We hope, and we have some efforts that are being put to test now where we can reach out to the governor as well as the mayor, since the churches have now been allowed to increase their number of attendees for funerals and services and the like. We're trying to get that same kind of restriction lifted for our area of service in the funeral industry. Right now, we have to make sure that, number one, there's only 10 attendees in that service. Number two, we have to make sure that there's social distancing to the extent we have to keep each attendee 6 feet apart. And at our place, we are requiring everyone who enters those doors to wear a mask.
So we've been joined by Lou Rago of Rago Brothers Funeral Home. Lou, you're joining Spencer Leak and Augustus Cage. So Lou, what's the change of funerals in your business? How has COVID-19 affected your business?
Well, you know, we historically the majority of our business has been traditional visitation with funeral service the next day. And because of the restrictions, we've kind of curtailed that to a 2 to 3 hour visitation the same morning as the burial or cremation. And again, just as the gentleman, Mr. Cage, said before me, we are rotating people 10 in, 10 out.
I saw on television, this was on CNN, there was a funeral director, and he was literally in the streets, just alarmed and saying, we are working at capacity. We can't do any more. We can't work any harder. We can't work any longer. And he was freaking. And he was saying, I am pulling bodies out of the freezer, out of the truck. And it was messing with him. He was having a rough time. What have your experiences been that makes it's different? The other thing I want to talk about is when we've had people in the hospital and it's a drop off. You drop your loved one off at the hospital and you can't visit, you can't hold hands, you can't say farewell. How do you cope with this grieving? What's your counsel? Spencer, what's your counsel? Because you all are, I mean, you're the last responders. You bring the closure to the family. You bring the closure to the loved one. What on earth do you say?
Well, when this first started, and hello, Mr. Rego.
How are you, Spencer? Good to see you.
Alrighty. When this first started, I was having a very, very difficult time. I was not sleeping, and because I was just concerned. This all hit us so quickly. It hit the funeral homes quickly. It hit the hospitals quickly. It hit the cemeteries quickly. And my main concern, Brother Cage, you'll understand this. My main concern was I going to be able throughout this pandemic to satisfy my client? Because, we may be handling 50 remains, 100 remains, but that one client is only concerned about their one loved one, no matter how many other clients we're handling. So with everything being new, everything changing, I was not sleeping because I wanted to be able to handle or satisfy that one client. But throughout the last couple of months, as this thing has continued, we have adjusted. And now I feel a little bit better because the public now understands what's going on. When this first happened and the governor made it 10 people, our clients were not having that. They were not understanding why 10 people. But now since they are seeing the daily counts of people passing away on TV every day, they have now gotten to understand that this thing is real. And so they understand what now the funeral director is going through. And our clients have been very understanding as to what we're doing. So I feel a little bit better about handling our clients now.
So did your clients understand that the 10 people regulation was not your doing, but that it was the government's doing and you were just complying?
Great question, because at first our clients were saying, these are your rules and why are you doing this to us? And we had to tell them, this is not the rule of Leak Funeral Home. This is not the rule of another funeral home. These are state regulations put out by Governor Pritzker. We cannot do anything about it, or our license, or we could be fined or our license taken. So once it got out to the public that it was not the rule of the funeral home and it was really state law, I started to feel a little bit better about handling our clients.
And people were a little more acceptance of it?
Yes, and I commend our families for understanding what we're going through. This is a time where we should be comforting them. However, once this has gone on a little bit, our clients are comforting us. And I appreciate that.
Wow.
Let me chime in on that.
Please.
We have had to, on occasion, have security at the entry of our place to the extent to very politely, diplomatically, and tactfully explain, because of the state regulations, we're only allowing we can only allow 10 individuals to come in for the service. And we've even asked the families during the arrangement process to help us identify who those 10 individuals are going to be. So we have a heads up on who we can permit into the facility for services. We have no control over what they do at church. That kind of falls under the purview of the clergy and the policies of the church. But as I mentioned earlier, on the day before of the visitation, we can do, as Mr. Ragos pointed out, 10 in, 10 out on a rotational basis for the time duration of that viewing visitation period. One of the things that's very, very important for people to understand, we as last responders, and I'm not sure I really care for that term or that label, but we're the people, the men and the women who are looked upon to be the big shoulders to our client families. They don't have they're not familiar with the death process, the grieving process many times, and we're the guiding light for them. And it's really been a very dicey situation to the extent of like walking on eggs, as Spencer has pointed out, to explain to the families. And as he has stated, the families are finally getting it and getting accustomed to it. And during the arrangement process, when we explain these policies and procedures, they're slowly accepting it and falling in line with this whole process. But as I mentioned earlier, hopefully Governor Pritzker will yield to our concerns to lift this 10-person requirement and at least raise it up to 50, like some of the churches are experiencing.
Mr. Cage, you said you don't like the term last responders. What would your preference be?
I don't know that I have a preference. We're the people that nobody really wants to entertain having a relationship with. As I was once years and years ago in the insurance business, my manager pointed out there's 3 things people don't even want to think about. Number one is getting old, getting sick, and dying. And any of those, particularly in the dying component, nobody even wants to deal with that. I've had many individuals tell me they want to prearrange and make advanced arrangements. And when they go to explain it to their children, the children say they don't want to hear about it because they don't want to face the inevitability of a parent or a loved one passing away. So from that standpoint, we have to be very, very careful in our choice of words, the approach that we take in serving these individuals, not just the person in the immediate family, but the guests and the other family members who come to pay their respects. We have to be diplomat all the way down the line.
Got a tough job.
Yes, we do.
Hey, Chicago, you've stayed home for months and saved lives. And now, because of all your hard work, we can go out. But we have to be safe. As long as we follow proper precaution, wear face coverings, social distance, we're good to go. Put on some pants, please, and head back to the office. Go ahead, get the pedicure, or get that tattoo that you won't regret. Dine al fresco and eat food you didn't make. Or the libraries are open, check out a book. It's like a podcast, but on paper. Get that root canal. Work on your short game. Enjoy yourself outside, but please remember, be safe, Chicago. And if you'll excuse me, there's one last thing I gotta do. That's better. Be safe, Chicago.
Vaccine development for COVID-19 is proceeding at a pace that is far faster than any vaccine development in history.
Dr. Baruch is the director of the Center for Virology and Vaccine Research at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. He has led groundbreaking work on vaccines for HIV and Zika.
Are you concerned you're moving too fast?
The goal is not to compromise patient safety at all, because ultimately a vaccine absolutely must be safe if it's going to be administered to large numbers of healthy people.
Researchers are taking part of the coronavirus DNA and transferring it into a weakened common cold virus. After it is placed into a cell, the body will produce antibodies, triggering an immune response.
Mr. Rago, you one of the conversations you called me and you were asking me to write about funerals, and that's how this show came about, because you were saying you got to write about funerals. Funerals are different. You had an incident where you had to actually call the police in order to control the people who were coming to a funeral. It was a larger funeral. Tell me about that.
This was probably the first or second week of what we're going through now. And as Mr. Cage had said, a lot of families in the beginning of this crisis thought it was our rules and regulations. And
You the funeral home. You
the funeral home.
Mhm.
And these folks were pretty upset. The immediate family was fine, but the people waiting outside had a difficult time with this 10 in, 10 out, and they just didn't get it. And unfortunately, some of them were getting angry, and we had to call 911 to just have the folks come out there, the police come out there and explain to them that this was not Mr. Rago's rule. This was not anybody in the funeral home's rule. We were just trying to follow the mandate from the governor of the state of Illinois.
How do you do the distance in the funeral home?
We
How
removed all of
does
our chairs.
distance work? You removed everything.
We left 10 chairs in there.
And they're spaced. The chairs are spaced.
Yeah, they're spaced. And I mean, I know it sounds cruel, it sounds cold, and my heart goes out to these people because that's their mother, their father, their sister, their brother that's laying in that casket. But we just have no control over it.
Spencer, what have you done? Have you done spacing? How have you handled spacing?
Well,
So-
in our funeral home, we're a little different because in our chapels, we mostly have pews that are, tied or bolted to the ground. So during the services, we will make announcements asking for people to social distance and space out. However, you'll have people that will come to me, Spencer, we live together. I'm not going to sit 6 feet away from my mother, and I live in the same house. So, you kind of take every family by itself, or, some families understand what you're talking about, but others will say what I just said. I live with this person. I'm not going to sit 6 feet away from her. Sorry, Mr. Leak, but I'm just not going to do that. So, you take every family individually, but that's one of the most difficult things that I've had to deal with since this started, the social distancing part. I think it's getting a little easier now because everybody that comes in is wearing a mask. So that kind of makes me feel better. And I think it kind of makes everybody else in the chapel feel better about the mask, about the spread, because people are now wearing the mask. But, people living in the same household, that's a little difficult to tell them to sit 6 feet away from each other.
Absolutely right.
Do you see an age difference? Do you see older people will do one thing, younger people will do something else? Do you see an age spread on behavior?
You know what? Everybody is trying their best to adhere to it, other than the people living in the same household. But everybody, now that this is 3 months in or so, everybody is getting it.
I know you all have installed viral services. So 10 people come, 25 people come, 50 people come, but the funeral itself might be 200 people. Should be there, could be there, would be there under ordinary circumstances. So funerals are going viral, going streaming. Tell me how that works. Mr. Cage, how does that work for you?
We're currently using the Facebook medium to reveal the services that are in progress.
You do it with
Earlier-
Facebook Live?
Yes, Facebook Live. We're also doing some webcasting with at the family's request, which is gives a little more of a panoramic view of what's going on. But to speak to Spencer's point and Mr. Rago's point, what we have initiated at our place is during the arrangement conference, because that sets the tone for how things are going to happen. We tell them we are restricted by state and local mandates to limit the attendees to 10 people. And we ask them to kindly identify the 10 people they want in attendance at that service. So we've got a heads up. So anybody beyond that, we have to maintain a hard line on saying at the family's request, these individuals and only these individuals are allowed for that service.
Do you take names?
We take names, and in some cases, we even ask for photographs, but names is probably the easiest and most convenient way. And many times, family members will come in a collective during the arrangement conference, so we have some kind of an earlier introduction to who they are.
Mr. Rago, are you doing streaming services too?
Only if the family requests it, and we have them set it up themselves.
You don't set it up?
We don't set it up. They could stream. They could do anything that they want in there. But I've always said all I am is an undertaker. So,
Right.
Whatever a family wants to do within the confines of the time that they have at our facility, they're more than welcome to do it. The other thing that we're doing, Spencer and Mr. Cage, is we station somebody in the lobby, and so when we're letting that, when 2 people leave and 2 people more are walking in, we say to them, please register, pay your respects. Unfortunately, you don't have time to visit like you would in a normal traditional visitation. So we're asking you to pay your respects, and please come out in an appropriate amount of time so that we could let some more folks come in. That's what we're limited to do.
Mr. Lee, what are you doing? Are you to share the funeral with a larger audience? Are you streaming? Are you Facebooking Live? What are you doing?
When this first started, families really did not want to stream their loved one service. They didn't want, I had a family tell me, quote, I don't want mama out there like that. However, since this has gone on, we have had more families wanting to stream. So we do offer those services to our families. I've hired I've hired 2 people to do that for us. What we find is that there will be maybe 75 people in the parking lot in their cars watching the service where there are 10 people on the inside. So that's what I've found lately. We have also hired security since all of the nightclubs are closed downtown. I just went to some of my friends and said, hey, I need some security guards. And they sent me 3 of the biggest guys you ever want to see with security on their shirts. And we have really had no problems. One of the gentlemen is here right now. But what he does, he's very nice, very, respectful. And he'll invite the people in, 2 out, 3 in, 3 out. So we have not had that much of a problem recently with what's going on. And hopefully, like Mr. Cage says, if they lift it to 50, that's going to be even better for us.
What happens? Let's say you've had a funeral and you've buried someone, and the funeral might have been 300-400 people. Are we going to have, maybe after COVID, are we going to have a series of memorial services where we can do it right, or do it like, not, I won't say right, but do it in our tradition where the repast is gone? We can't do that anymore.
Right.
So do you think there will be, I don't know, maybe even next year, a flood of memorial services so that the dignitaries can come, so that my whole family can come, so that all of the friends can come to pay their respects, final respects to a person?
I've told my families that if they ever wanted to do that, they can come and set up the memorial service at the funeral home. It'll be no charge.
We did the same thing, Spencer. Same thing.
Come back and do it. And what about you, Mr. Cage?
Yeah, we essentially do the same thing. What people have to understand and what we're trying to get across is to view the person, the deceased, for the last time is for the benefit of allowing family members and very close friends to have closure, to look at that deceased individual, pay their respects for that last time, so that they can get on the road to what we call a good grief recovery. We also point out that after the fact, it's very important to come back together, to commemorate the person's memory, to celebrate that person's life, to have tributes and the like for that person. And you mentioned there's no more repast. I tend to disagree, because at the conclusion of that memorial or before the memorial, people can assemble in the way that they used to share stories and so forth. It's so very important and comforting to the family to have these larger number of people come together. That family is comforted by the fact that these people showed up to pay their respects, to express their remarks, and to share memories. So we encourage very emphatically, let's do this for now. Let's do what we have to do now in terms of burying or cremating the deceased remains, but let's not forget the celebration, which is so very important for them to have closure.
You're saying the repast is still occurring?
You can have a repast before or after memorial service. The only difference between a memorial and a funeral is that the deceased body is not there at the memorial.
No, I think she's talking about eating.
Yeah, I'm talking about after the funeral, to have the eating at the funeral parlor, or maybe in the community room at the church or at a restaurant. Is that still occurring?
That's very much can be in play. There's no restriction. Once the limitation is lifted on the number of attendees, things can go very much back to normal.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying now during the COVID period.
Now,
what I'm saying.
You know, Mayor Lightfoot just now last week, Mayor Lightfoot just lifted the restriction on people who could come into restaurants. It's just this week that people are being permitted in. Prior to this week, everybody had to meet outside. It's social distancing.
So what I understand from Mayor Lightfoot is that in the next coming days, you may be able to have people, but the tables need to be 6 feet apart, and you can only have 10 people at a table. So I'm thinking within the next couple of days, repast may be coming back. So I think we need to all get prepared for that. I haven't had a repast since the 1st of March.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing, Spencer. I'm thinking that within the next couple of days, folks will be able to have that we just call it a funeral luncheon. I'm thinking that's going to be with those restrictions, 10 people at a table, the table 6 feet apart.
Right.
But gentlemen, what we're going to have, and Hermine, what we're going to have to remember, just like the restaurant venues, they're only going to be able to allow either 20 or whatever percentage the mayor mandates that can be at that repast or that funeral luncheon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can't go over what the restaurants are being restricted to.
Right.
So,
and see, I'm a little different because one of our funeral homes is in the city of Chicago, then the other is in the suburbs. So I'm going to have different rules for the city versus different rules for the suburbs. So I've got to deal with a few things in the coming days.
Wow, you might have different rules depending on the location.
Correct.
We are now having 40,000+ new cases a day. I would not be surprised if we go up to 100,000 a day if this does not turn around. And so I am very concerned. If you look at what's going on and just look at some of the film clips that you've seen of people congregating, often without masks, of being in crowds and jumping over and avoiding and not paying attention to the guidelines that we very carefully put out, we're going to continue to be in a lot of trouble. and there's going to be a lot of hurt if that does not stop.
How did a newly emerged coronavirus manage to hold the entire world at its mercy? Why was advanced medical research not able to combat its spread? And is this merely the start of other potentially unstoppable global pandemics?
So how do you think funerals have changed forever? I mean, will the Facebook Live, the streaming, will that be a part of? But how has it changed the impact? How has it changed forever? Or does it change, or do we just go back to normal shortly?
I'm thinking we're going to go right back to normal.
This
This
is
is the new normal.
Well, yeah, but Augustus, I honestly and truly believe once all these restrictions are lifted, everybody's going to go back to the way it was.
Me too, Mr. Rego. I'm thinking people cannot wait to celebrate their loved ones.
That's correct.
You know, when this first started, I thought people were just going to go straight to direct cremations. With us, I have had more, funerals with renting a casket and then cremations versus direct cremations. So I think people they're not going to allow this pandemic to just throw their loved ones away. My clients are having funeral services and they're celebrating their loved ones. And even if they're not having a complete funeral, they're having a visitation, allowing their friends to 10 in and 10 out, 10 in and 10 out. So I think people, when this is all over, hopefully in the near future, I'm praying for a vaccine. I'm praying for treatment. But I think really people are going to want to celebrate their loved ones even more so than they did before.
You know, I have to relay a story that I often do to folks when they talk about our industry. And, when I was a kid, I started working for my father in my second year of high school, as a summer job. And one day I was coming home and I said to my father, Dad, how come we put people through this? And he said, we don't put people through anything. We help them through something. And I would be working visitation in the evening, and there was always a fella that would come in and sit with my father and say, Joe, when I go, just throw me in a box. This is all ridiculous. I don't want anybody to go through any of this stuff when I go. And 5 weeks later, when his mother passed away, he would be in there saying, I want the best of everything.
Right.
This is my mother. We're going to celebrate her life. So, when it happens to you, you want to throw everything out the window and say, you know what, we're gonna honor my loved one.
Yes.
So this is the new normal. The limitations will go away.
If I were a betting man, I'd say for sure. If they lifted all of the restrictions tomorrow, we would be back. The furniture would be back into the funeral home. We'd be having a traditional 1 day, 2 day service with funeral the next day. Absolutely.
I believe that.
And the Facebook Live and the streaming service, that might be a part of service.
Well, they may include it in whatever they're doing now. We've noticed with a lot of our immigrant funerals where there are still people left in other countries, they've been streaming those for the last year or two, back to their home country. So that may still be a part of it, but I don't think that you're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm-hmm. How's your employee morale? Has the COVID-19 affected employee morale?
Well, I've got a story for that. When the governor shut the state down, my father came to me and he said, son, it's been a good run, 86 years. However, I think we're going to close. And and because he was concerned about the employees' health. And that's the type of the person my father is. He puts everybody before himself. And so I said, Dad, if that's what you want to do, then that's what we're going to do. We had a meeting. He called me on Saturday night. We had a meeting with the staff on Sunday morning on Cottage Grove, had everybody in the chapel. We were all separated around this big room that seats 500 people. We had 60 people spread out across the room. And I took it upon myself to poll each employee. I called out their name, such and such. Are we going to open or are we going to close? And each one of our employees said, yes, Mr. Lee Spencer Jr., we want to stay open. We want to continue. We want to serve the public. So I commend our staff for doing what they did. And my father, the look on his face, he felt so relieved that they wanted to work it out throughout this pandemic. And so what we did, we gave them all raises. So
Wow.
we appreciate them very much. I can't say that enough. Leak Funeral Home employees, if you're watching, I love you. I thank you for allowing our business to continue.
But your father do you think was he overwhelmed, Spencer? Was he just overwhelmed?
I think yes. He just did not want anybody to get sick or die because of him. So yes, he was ready to close. I don't know if we were going to close for 2 months or 6 months, but he was ready to close down the funeral home.
Wow.
Hermine, one of the things that to validate and enhance Spencer's comment, our employees have had a choice. They make a choice, and it was put to them, how do you feel about continuing to work in this particular new environment? And like his staff, every one of ours said, we want to do this. But once they decided to come on board, continue to serve these families, because many of them have been in the same position these grieving families have been in. So they understood. They have empathy. So we then had an obligation as their employers to say, okay, not only are we going to take every measure we can to protect you, as much as we're going to protect our client families and the guests that come through, but we're going to take extra measures to see that you're taken care of and safeguarded through apparel, through safe distancing, sanitizers, the whole 9 yards. Because once they've committed to continue to serve with us, we have an obligation to do everything we can to protect them.
Lou, what happened with you? What's the company morale? And you all have family businesses, so this is
Yes.
not like we're dealing with some strangers or some, you're dealing with family, and you all have worked together for a long time in all of your businesses. But Lou, what did you go through any considerations on clothing?
The only considerations we had, and it wasn't as formal as what these gentlemen did, when this started to really, when the governor made all of these regulations, and rightfully so, and the mayor did, we just sat down and said, this is what it is. I hate to use a line from a movie, but this is the life we chose.
Right.
And so we just said, we're all going to take the necessary precautions. I mean, I was around for the AIDS epidemic. The AIDS epidemic is kid stuff compared to what we're going through now.
Correct.
Question.
But, it was a matter of you have to just prepare yourself, wear the right clothing, do everything. But no one even batted an eyelash about whether or not we wanted to stay working with us.
The fact that somebody got the coronavirus who hadn't traveled anywhere is very concerning.
Being this close is the scariest thing in the world for me right now because it's only 15 minutes from Vacaville from here. So you can tell me I can go to Vacaville and I have to be more careful. It's a scary situation to know that I can sit around and touch something and somebody could have been there and they had that virus and then all of a sudden I'm contaminated.
I saw it on the news this morning. I didn't watch the news last night and I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm really worried. Well, I feel like after the news today, like I shouldn't even be out of the house, honestly, but that's not really a practical thing. But I wash my hands all the time anyways. I'm very careful. So as much a change in my habits, probably not wanting to be out in public as much.
I think more should have been done in the beginning before this even happened, to be able to have things in place to be able to prevent this type of a problem.
How did a newly emerged coronavirus manage to hold the entire world at its mercy? Why was advanced medical research not able to combat its spread? And is this merely the start of other potentially unstoppable global pandemics?
Vaccine development for COVID-19 is proceeding at a pace that is far faster than any vaccine development in history.
Dr. Baruch is the director of the Center for Virology and Vaccine Research at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. He has led groundbreaking work on vaccines for HIV and Zika.
Are you concerned you're moving too fast?
The goal is not to compromise patient safety at all, because ultimately a vaccine absolutely must be safe if it's going to be administered to large numbers of healthy people.
Researchers are taking part of the coronavirus DNA and transferring it into a weakened common cold virus. After it is placed into a cell, the body will produce antibodies, triggering an immune response.
Spencer, you talked earlier about when this first, you talked about not sleeping. Just the trauma, because this is traumatizing, just the trauma of this. How did your family life, how was your family life affected otherwise? I mean, because normalcy it's like one day we woke up and we were in this mess and there's nothing normal, the new normal, but there is no normal. How were you affected family-wise, your family life?
So when this, around the beginning, I was so traumatized that I showed my wife where all of our insurance policies were.
Yep.
I gave her all of my passwords to everything. I gave her the number to our accountant. I gave her the number to our insurance agent. And I just sent her an email and I said, this is where everything is, because I just did not know. I've got a case of high blood pressure, so I guess I have underlying conditions. So, and so that's part of the reason why, the main reason why I wasn't sleeping is because I wanted to be able to serve our clients. That's number one. Number two, I was afraid of dying. And my son, who just turned 16, would I be able to see him graduate from high school? Would I be able to see him one day take over the funeral home? So those are the two main reasons that why I was not sleeping. So yes, my wife has all of the insurance information now. I said, this is where this is. This is where this is. So I have backed off of that a little bit when I get home. You know, I've got one chair that I sit in the house. I haven't hugged my daughter in months. I mean, literally in months. My son is a little bit, you know, he's a guy, so he's going, oh, Dad, forget about that. I'm going to hug you. And he'll just come and grab me. But I'll almost make a mistake and try to hug my daughter, and she'll say, no, Dad, we can't do that right now. She wrote me a nice little letter saying, one day soon, I hope I can hug you. But now, Ms. Hartman, I have not hugged her in 3 months. Literally.
I think the biggest problem that we all have in this industry, and maybe these two gentlemen know more than I do. The unfortunate part about this thing is no one can tell us how long this virus lasts after death.
Right.
I mean, no one has said to us, you know what, after 72 hours, you could do, you could go ahead and embalm and you're not going to have to worry about it. No one has said anything to us, and I don't think anybody knows. But that's the biggest problem with regards to family life. You go home and you almost feel like you have to surround yourself in plexiglass.
Right. Well, Mr. Rago, my concern is not so much the remains. It was at first, because I did go on several removals from hospitals, and it would be 5 remains in a cooler, and all 5 of them had COVID. And so I was concerned at first, but I'm more concerned with family members, number one, not even knowing that their loved one tested positive for COVID. And now they're coming in making their arrangements, and they could have been exposed. So that's who I was more concerned about. Not so much so now, because for the last couple of months, we've all been wearing masks, and now the plexiglass is up everywhere. However, during those first couple of weeks, my concern was the families that are making arrangements who did not know their loved one tested positive. I was the one who told several families that their loved one, and those families got upset with me because they did not know, they were not told by the hospital that their loved one had COVID.
All too often we're the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
Mr. Cage, your personal life, your personal relationships affected by this at all?
Well, number one, I believe in testing, contrary to what the president's talking about. Every one of our staff, we required to be tested. I personally have been tested twice, and I'm a stern believer in testing, because if you show any signs, you have an obligation to protect yourself as well as your coworkers and family. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, we have on pretty good ground. We had a situation just last week. We had a husband and wife. We had a double funeral. Mm. Both of them passed away from COVID. And so that sent a shockwave through their immediate family, which included 5 children and 15 grandchildren. Mm. And for all accounts, and we encourage, I said, well, in light of the circumstances, I strongly encourage that your first opportunity to take advantage of this testing, because to be proactive means to be pro-life. And from that standpoint, everybody took it, appreciated the recommendation, and because you all may have read about several weeks ago, an individual who attended a funeral, was COVID infected, went to a repast and a birthday party, and it pointed out he spread that disease among a number of other family members, several of whom ended up passing away.
Right.
And as Mr. Leak has pointed out, there are so many people that don't even know that they have the virus. And you have to understand what Dr. Fauci and Dr. Gottlieb will point out. You have people who are asymptomatic, no fever, no cough, no respiratory issues, but got the stuff on them like a bomber.
There was a case in the South, I think it was North Carolina, and the person was quite popular in the community. And the family said, we're going to have a funeral like we know to have a funeral. And they did. They had a repast, and they said, we're going to celebrate his life like we know to. Well, from 200 people, 50 people got COVID. either from the funeral itself and or from the repast, and 12 of them died.
Oh my gosh.
So there have been some stories. There have been some real.
My biggest worry, and I am very proud of the fact of how the nation came out in protest to the issues surrounding George Floyd's death, the young lady, what was it?
Breonna.
The young man in Atlanta, and countless others. I am so proud and thankful for these peaceful protests that took place, but I am extremely worried about what's going to happen and how this disease is going to rear its ugly head in the late fall and early onset of winter. I'm worried about it.
Right, whether they will be tested. Well, you know, the mayor in Atlanta, I saw her on CNN, and that was one of the things that she said is go and get tested. You all have been out in the open. Some people had on masks, some didn't. Social distancing was not practiced, but go and be tested for the same fear that you just expressed.
And not only that, we have a chief executive of these United States of America who refuses to wear a mask, held a rally down there in Tulsa yesterday, and the majority of these people were not masked, did not observe any social distancing. And Lord knows how that mess is going to be spread, you know.
With 6 people on his staff having received COVID before they went down as they were doing advanced work. So oh my goodness. Spencer, you said something that I think has become a lot of people are doing, but not talking about. I know of 10 people that have died of COVID, 3 of them relatively close. But people are beginning to talk about the planning of your funeral because COVID is so fast. I know one person who got COVID from a microphone. He was a newscaster, and he got COVID through the microphone. My last note to him was on Friday, and he was dead on Sunday. I know another guy who's a photographer. I was calling to do some work. He was gone. They both died on the same day. But it's so fast, and so many people, I've had so many friends say, we need to start planning our funerals. And it's not morbid. It's not we need to plan our funeral because good planning, I guess that's what you do. But it was like, this thing is so fast. You could just one day be gone. In 3 days, you could just be gone. How do you, good thing to do, right thing to do? They announce you got COVID. Should you start planning your funeral? How do you cope with that?
I was just telling my father Saturday, I said, Dad, it's just an eerie feeling out here.
It's empty.
He said, son, this is something that we never would have thought we would see in our lifetime. So, Brother Cage, how do you feel? I mean, it's just an eerie, things are just quiet. You know,
it's spooky. It's eerie.
It's spooky. Yes, that's a good word.
Lonely. It's terrifying. It's if ever there is a test of your faith and your resolve, we're living in it.
When I was a little boy in Sunday school, I was about 5 years old. We had a little Sunday school teacher who talked about how much God loved us. And as the class was ending, the little girl that sat next to me said, well, teacher, how can we show God how much we love him? And she looked at her and smiled. She said, baby, that's easy. We can show God how much we love him by how we treat his people. That summed it up for me, the balance of my life.
Wow. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for helping so many probably get through this eerie moment. Spencer, that's our word, eerie.
Eerie.
It is. It's an eerie moment. But indeed, your services are so important.
Thank you.
So important. And thank you for just helping us cope and helping us understand and realize kind of where we are. We are going to go through this for a moment. There is no vaccine. Vaccines don't come overnight. Vaccines take time. And as we listen to the medics,
I think if we left with the best piece of advice is just listen to the authorities, and for goodness sake, wash your hands as often as you can. I think that's the biggest deterrent we can offer right now is keep your hands clean, wash your face, and wear your mask when you can. And
social distancing. Social distancing is key.
Yeah.
Spencer Leak Jr., thank you. Leak Funeral Homes. Lou Rago, thank you, of Rago Brothers Funeral Home. And Augustus Cage, thank you so very much. Cage Memorial. Thank you. God bless us. God bless you. God bless Chicago. Let's stay well.
My message to the American people is that I know that there's a lot of concern and energy about getting back to normal. It's a great stress on people to be locked in, but there's a fundamental basic thing that you should be doing is don't throw all caution to the wind so that you can open up and help the economy by getting jobs back and doing things like that. But that doesn't mean that you walk around without a mask, that you jump into a crowd, that you stop washing your hands, that you stop doing the things that are important. So the plea is that from a public health standpoint, you'd want to do it this way. If you're not going to do it this way, then at least do these things.
Hi, I'm Hermine Hartman, bringing you a special edition of Indigo Studio, COVID While Black. And we're brought to you through a special fund, journalism fund, from the McCormick Foundation. The McCormick Foundation funds communities in Chicagoland and across Illinois with programs that are educational, informative, and engaging with our citizens. The fund is to strengthen democracies, and that's what we've done today. We've talked to citizens about COVID-19. It's been an engaging conversation, and we thank you for being with us and hope this information has been helpful. Indigo Studio, COVID While Black, brought to you by McCormick Foundation.